Okay, are we live? Are we live? Okay, we're going on. Alright, and we are live. Let's see. Alright, fantastic. Okay, are we live? Right, very good. Okay, now to just share this out and see who is going to bother showing their lovely faces here today. Although, not so much faces, but general presence, given how online discussion works of the live stream capacity. It would be cool if I got other people to have their cameras and to talk with me about live streaming and something like that. Regardless, I reckon that this topic I'm about to discuss is so important that it's worth talking about. So just give me a moment while I just make the necessary setups. I will be with you very shortly. If there are any comments, I will address them. This is what happens when you don't share links in advance. I'm still learning about OBS Studio. I'm still learning. Alright, I should probably do the trick. And let's see. It'd be amazing if this were to happen. It's highly unlikely, but it's worth a shot. Anyway. Ah, Crystal Blue Stars here. Nice, nice. He said, I did the Pung Connection charts. Also, I need to watch this after work. I go in 6 minutes. Okay, sure. I myself am quite busy as is at the moment, so I just thought I'd make this quick presentation. I mean, it's not going to be the best presentation. I mean, this was fairly rushed. I didn't like take hours to make this. I mean, I just kind of put it together in a short time, probably within an hour, to be fair. It's been a long time since I used PowerPoint presentation. Given how OBS Studio works, I thought, I think this is a good opportunity to give some online live lectures. That way it'd be fun to give some feedback from the audience via the live streaming, and that way I could enlighten you directly, because I've been having discussions with friends, particularly with Double A, saying that, oh, Calum, you've got a lot of insight about making us think more deeply about the entertainment we consume. That's one of the main purposes of this channel. It's to make my viewers think more deeply about the entertainment that they are watching, because a lot of the time there's some underlying themes, and there's a lot of discussions that could be come around with it, and usually there's more intent poured into it than what's seen at the surface level. I mean, the same is true for any given film and material, but animation happens to be a very unique form of storytelling, in the fact that it can take advantage of visual storytelling, and it has the potential to delve into mature topics in a really creative manner. So I just thought I'd address it to you all, and this is still working, right? Yeah, still working. Alright, so I think I've built a fair amount of audience, so let's get started. So firstly, I wanted to start off with this presentation by talking about, well, what do you mean by eternal beauty? What do you mean by eternal beauty in the first place? Something I've learned over the years of, looking at entertainment, going to the art museums, as well as and even studying art to the point of graduating from college with a Bachelor of the Arts degree, I've noticed that despite what people may say on a mainstream basis, I found that the stories and the artworks that work the best tap into this transcendent reality of eternal beauty. Now, what is eternal beauty? Eternal beauty is the kind of beauty that is timeless. It's relevant to anyone of any age, anywhere. It doesn't matter where you live, doesn't matter where you're from. I mean, sure, we can have different forms of cultural expression, but eternal beauty, on the whole, makes our most beloved animations possible in the first place. Because without it, things just come and go, and we just move on to the next thing needlessly. Crystal Blue Star says, lectures online are a cool idea for you. Yay! I thought so, thanks. Sometimes I really want to make an over-analysis poem series, and I'd probably collab with you on it, potentially. That's a good idea, Crystal Blue Star. You know what we should do? I think the two of us should make a presentation like the one I'm making, and then I live stream that presentation, and I give you a shout out. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. So going back to Eternal Beauty, I've noticed that there's some artworks that try to use a sense of alarming, immediate narcissism, as it were, as in, hey, look at me, I'm fulfilling the current fad, and this is politically relevant, or this is gonna be hip, dog. But I've noticed those kind of artworks immediately get outdated. Like, for about a month or so, or even a few weeks, people will say, oh, that exists, but then much later, they'll think, they will have completely forgotten about it. Why? Because it's not timeless beauty. It's not timeless beauty. What is timeless beauty? Timeless beauty is something that doesn't depend on current fads or trends or immediate political pandering. Eternal beauty, it's transcendent, it depends on objective beauty. Now, you may have noticed that I have been using ChatGPT to assist me here. However, I must tell you this, ChatGPT, as reliable as it is, it's not a person, it is not the end-all be-all of all information, it's just a tool to find out information. And ChatGPT needs to be corrected, and it can be manipulated, so you have to use it carefully. But that said, if you use it wisely, it can give you great resources. So I've noticed that even ChatGPT was trying to say, well, beauty can be subjective to different experiences, and I get that people have their own experiences that they'd like to suggest, but on the whole, even throughout all the different cultures, even from a sort of Joseph Campbell kind of standpoint, objective beauty still exists. Think about it. Why do people prefer people who are kind and people who are willing to take care of others over someone who's a complete narcissist? Why do we appreciate patterns and symmetry and color and harmony rather than disharmony, rather than asymmetrical stuff? Why is it that we prefer smooth surfaces over warty bulges? It's because deep down inside, we innately recognize that there's this metaphysical reality of aesthetic judgments that cannot be empirically measured. And it taps into the objective beauty that everyone knows about and everyone can express. And every time someone expresses objective beauty, it's timeless. But this is a day and age where people seem to be scared of objective beauty because there's some fascinating accountability about objective beauty that should encourage others to work for it and to bring it out for other people to see. So now that I've got that point over with, I'll say what Crystal Blue Star was saying before he had to go. Also, there's a short film Park Demi made called Guilt. All right, Park Demi, the creator of Pung, right? And it could get more traction too. All right, nice. All right, work time. See ya. See you, Space Cowboy. I'll get to that. Yeah. So eternal beauty is timeless. It's everywhere. So, like, for example, The Lord of the Rings is tapping into eternal beauty because it taps into themes that were relevant to back in historical times and will be relevant to us going forward to this day. Stuff like courage and heroism and the fight for beauty and the things worth fighting for. Or another example of eternal beauty, timeless beauty, I suppose Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol. Themes like redemption, reconciliation, and accounting for what you did in the past. That is always going to be relevant to us, so that's what makes it eternally beautiful. Of course, on the next hand, there is a risk when it comes to this kind of portrayal, because often at times I'll notice some media, well, even the ones that seem to have well-intended messages, they can tend to shove messages down your throat. So it's less of a story being told and more like a lecture. And you just think, well, why bother with a sloppily, cheesily, if that's a word, why bother making a cheesy written dialogue drama on the cheap side when you could just give us a lecture? You're either going to give us one thing or the other. You can't do both. I was actually pondering on this for some time. How is it that you could input philosophy into your entertainment? And I've been told by a friend that the way you put philosophy into a story is to make it about the character's philosophy, not yours. So that's a way of putting things into perspective. So what are the timeless themes? So look at these themes on the screen, and you'll notice that in the best of our stories, especially the stories that have been passed down through our history, as well as the stories that are still celebrated, still rewatched again and again and again, the stories that are highly endorsed by lots of people to this day, you'll notice these reoccurring themes. There's the theme of good versus evil, the fact that there are bad ideologies out there trying to oppress and to get away with states of power, and there is a good within people about the potential to view everyone as equals on a spiritual basis, as well as make use of each other's unique physical talents to get together and overcome the oppressing odds to eventually get stronger together. There's themes of love and sacrifice, redemption, heroic courage. Many stories getting into the big debate between the conflict between fate and free will, or the harmony of both. There's all kinds of journeys, lots of stories of journeys. I mean, sure, you get a few slice of life stories here and there, but on the whole, most of the stories tend to be journeys of some kind, whether it be one of self-discovery or self-growth, or an actual big journey, a physical journey, like we see in The Hobbit, or like Star Wars, delving into sort of Joseph Campbell kind of monomyth. You got the existential themes, in which those who are brave and bold enough will delve into and be given solutions on how they could approach life. There's cultural heritage about getting to know the geographical state of the world around them, and that's enlightening because the world's not just their own place. It's so much out there to go and see potentially and to be inspired by. There's depth to these stories of timeless beauty, and the fact that even if a story that has eternal beauty in it appears to be simple, there's always just that inevitable prospect that things will hold up really well because of the timeless beauty that's there. They'll also need a bit of levity here and there, so levity can come in the form of humor, some light-hearted moments, things that'll may increase a sense of camaraderie with one another, and especially the need for connection. Often at times there'll be themes of isolation, or the themes of relying on friendship, the power of friendship, and things like that. As cheesy as that sounds, it's true. We need friends and family to get through life together. So I've established that there is an eternal beauty, and the best of our stories tend to orient itself along timeless beauty. So the more the more a story or a piece of art taps into these timeless beauty themes, the more an artwork or a story takes advantage of these themes of timeless beauty, the more it will touch into the eternal beauty that will last for all time, for anyone of any age to be enlightened by. So what does animation have to do with this? So, I mean, there's many ways you could portray the stories, but animation happens to be a particular kind of medium that has a lot of potential to have a lot of creative freedom. So, with animation, you have limitless creativity and imagination. And it's not restricted by any live action restraints. I mean, take Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away, for example. Pardon me. If you take Hayao Miyazaki's Spirited Away, for example, you'll notice that there's a lot of abstract imagery and so much imaginative visual storytelling that says a lot about the kind of themes Miyazaki is going for in terms of identity and environmentalism and the necessity for love and the theme of growing up. All that kind of imagery could be done with practical effects and CGI, but given the over-reliance of CGI nowadays especially, it probably wouldn't look very good. So, but with animation, it's much more easier to do. Well, I mean, obviously, there's still the necessary discipline of having to animate the thing, but you get the idea. It's easier to portray. It's much more palpable for people to sink in. Hello, Brooks. Making a presentation live so that people can learn about animation. Just telling people about what I'm aiming to do with this channel. Feel free to watch along. I will join you later on. So, contrary to popular belief, especially with Western superstitions, I would say, animation isn't just for little children. I mean, I can understand why animation could appeal to the younger demographic television makers, because it's easy to make it appealing, it's bright, it's colorful. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, but the thing is, animation has the capacity to be so much more, and I've seen it. I mean, a lot of it comes over from Japan, but the West is capable of doing it as well. It helps if you don't talk down to children, or anyone for that matter, as well as take advantage of the capacity that animation has on offer. So, let's continue on. There are many themes that are prevalent in the most mature forms of animation that I've noticed. So, for starters, let's talk about themes of emotional healing from trauma and the empowerment of love, as well as transformation and redemption. I just thought I'd put these two in the same kind of page because there's sort of an interlink in there. And also, I've decided to explore Pinterest to find the best possible images to suggest what I'm talking about, especially this one. I love this artwork of Thorfinn and Thorfinn, what he was before compared to who he is now. I love that. Anyway, so animation has the potential to visualize emotional healing from trauma and how love empowers people. So I could cite Violet Evergarden, the Inside Out movies, Treasure Planet, Kung Fu Panda 2, Kubo and the Two Strings, and Boy and the Heron, and A Silent Voice as different examples of emotional healing. Obviously with Inside Out, the mental state is literalized. the mental landscape of Inside Out is shown in a very overtly imaginative sense, in that all the characters represent different emotions, and all this brilliantly wacky creative imagery represents the different states of the mind. Now, of course, I've had discussions with people suggesting Inside Out's probably not very accurate in regards to, like, Jungian psychology and stuff like that, and I'm sure expert psychologists can maybe nitpick about a few things about the Inside Out movies, but on the whole, the Pixar team definitely did their best to research about the necessity for all these different emotions, the states of the mind, going through the different stages of life, as well as the importance of each of the emotions, including sadness. In the first film, it's all about learning that it's okay to be sad. The show brilliantly visualizes how, a lot of people would want to be joyful. Anyone would want that, so we just want to suppress sadness, but the more we repress the sadness, the more we're suppressing the need to confront the suffering in life. We try to dumb it down. So sadness tries to intervene in moments where Riley would have needed to be sad, but because joy is so toxically spontaneous about making sure Riley's life is just right, she doesn't allow sadness to come close to the computer, which is controlling Riley's response to different situations, even though sadness instinctually realizes that Riley needs to be sad at times. So because of this conflict, they end up getting flown into the back of the mind, and this symbolizes that when we repress sadness and joy for too long, when we repress sadness for too long, we also suppress our joy. So we're left with the other emotions as a sort of counterfeit to try to cope with our lack of joy and sadness in a given situation. And so the rest of the film is visualizing the emotional state of Riley and the growing up stage. And it's so fascinating when you realize that the most complex character in both Inside Out movies is not any of the emotions themselves. It's actually Riley herself, because what we're seeing is what's going on in Riley's mind. So this is basically an elaborate character study. So we get a brilliantly profound scene there with two of them reconciling. And of course, in the sequel, we're introduced to new emotions relating to puberty, with anxiety, envy, embarrassment, and Inoi. We'll talk more about that later on with Cowboy Bebop. There's many other ways of portraying emotional growth. In Kung Fu Panda 2, Po has to confront his inner demons in regards to the past, and the film brilliantly uses symbols as well as flashbacks, as well as creatively using the raindrop to represent Poe's need to find inner peace within himself and to make himself grow as an individual. With Violet Evergarden, emotional healing from trauma is shown on an episodic and serialized basis. And there's often subtle ways in which that's portrayed through each of the character interactions, and her learning how people are not just machines, they're people. And The Boy and the Heron, which I rewatched recently, delves headfirst into themes about grief, and the creator Hayao Miyazaki, who's very prominent in this presentation, is visually processing the grief that he felt when losing his mother. So the whole thing about Boy and the Heron is that it's sort of Dante's Inferno type story about going to this magical underworld that's outside of time and space, and the boy is doing the thing that he couldn't do before, save his mother figure, as well as reconciling and things like that. This kind of emotional healing has the capacity to be brilliantly visually portrayed in these kinds of movies. Of course, live action could do that too, but with animation, you have much more imaginative capacity to showcase the emotions or really give some flair to specific symbolic characters and items and objects and settings to visualize the current mental state of different characters, and it's more flexible with animation. And with transformation and redemption, you've got stories like Prince of Egypt, The Beauty and the Beast and its adaptations. You've got Hibine Renmei, Finding Nemo, and other great stories I could point to, where live action could do this as well, but there's some sequences that can be very creatively done, especially in the likes of Vinland Saga, where there's a whole scene where Thorfinn has a nightmare about his past misdeeds, and so it's constantly going back and forth between his former self, his younger self, and then all these imagery of sheep, imagery of going into hell, and then climbing out again, clawing his way out, with all the people he's killed, like weighing him down. That kind of imagery is difficult to do with live action, and it's better portrayed with animation. And of course, you get other sequences that are similar to that, where like inner demons are confronted, and there's some other beautiful symbols that can signify genuine growth, such as like a simple act, or even like the main character from Soul reconciling with number two by just simply giving number two an object that's really appealed to her. So, I mean, I could go on, but animation basically hinges upon the strength of visual storytelling. And I've noticed that animated movies and TV shows particularly can be very strong with its capacity for visual storytelling. I mean, of course, people in like the silent film era and things like that would have depended on visual storytelling, but well, that was until like Citizen Kane came along to really take advantage of theatrical spacing and more capacity for visual storytelling. So the need for visual storytelling hasn't stopped, but there's something about animation that really enhances visual storytelling. That rule of show, don't tell. In fact, there's some animations that thrive on putting an extra minimum on telling and putting more of an emphasis on showing. The Red Turtle, for example, is a film with basically no dialogue whatsoever, aside from characters going, "Hey!" or things like that. There's no dialogue throughout the film, so all the expressions are shown bodily or through the circumstances or through the facial expressions. There was this one scene that would have been a real challenge to the filmmakers, and it's a scene where this young man is processing going beyond the island to go on an adventure, and he has to talk to his parents about it. And the way they do it is, boy has a dream of seeing his parents, but then seeing out into the ocean, see the adventure with his turtle friends, and then when he wakes up, he just sits next to his parents, gives them a look, and then the parents just give a look of, oh, it's that time. Okay, it's time for him to go. And then he goes, and I think, that's brilliant. That's the kind of scene where it would have been much easier to just use dialogue, but they actually went to the effort to find a way to use the bare minimum to convey that he wants to leave and to have an adventure. And that's great. It's completely possible to convey arguably any kind of message just on a purely visual showcasing, and that kind of visual storytelling can really speak to the soul. With Samurai Jack, this is a show that really excels at style over substance. Usually that doesn't really work because it can lead to a lot of setbacks in regards to plot and structure, but Samurai Jack works because the plot itself is so simple and so minimal that it makes room for other aspects such as the style, the flair, and all these approaches that you wouldn't normally see in a lot of Western products. Like, for example, it's a surprisingly very slow-paced show, especially in its first 4 seasons. The reason why it's that way is because it's taking its time to really immerse you with its slow-paced atmosphere, really get you to visualize what kind of environment our main character is going through, followed by some moments of intense, really fast-paced action, so that the action feels all the more intense. And the animation itself is really smooth, very stylized, and it's very strong, and it's very clear with its storytelling. It's very impressive, and there's a lot of cultural diversity portrayed within this minimalistic geographic kind of art style. It's very impressive, very, very impressive. Another favorite example of mine of visual storytelling is the Violet Evergarden series. I was also introducing this to someone just recently, and there is a great dependency on visual storytelling to enhance the story. one of the key objects in that story is the object of the brooch. The main character is a child soldier who was under the influence of one of the few human people who actually cared about her in the army, and so seemingly as a subconscious way of affection, she purchases this brooch which has the same color as her her Major Gilbert's eyes, as a subconscious way of expressing love to him. Of course, in the nature of the show, she doesn't know how to express love because she's a child soldier and she doesn't know life outside the battlefield. And I've even made a speculative video and another one suggesting that Violet may be autistic. But enough of that. But basically, the point is, the brooch visually represents the anchor point for Violet's center point for love, and the rest of the show is about Violet figuring out, well, what does it mean to love somebody? You got other visual symbolisms like the metaphor of burning, and there's even a shot where Violet's positioned in a specific way where you see the flame on her to visualize her burning. It's very cleverly done, and I could point to another example of the scene where it's raining and in a point where characters are in a bit of emotional distress, but then the moment Violet says something to clarify what she's doing, the sun comes out, which represents clarity. So that's a great example of visual storytelling. Another theme I've noticed in mature animation is love in spite of the odds. I've noticed this in stories like Kubo and the Two Strings, the Shrek franchise, including the Puss in Boots spin-off series, Hunchback of Notre Dame, Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, The Prince of Egypt, Princess Mononoke, Trigun, Vinland Saga, and currently my top favorite anime show ever, Monster by Naoki Urasawa. These stories visually inspire people to endure and to see the best in people no matter what they've done. And there's various ways it does that. With the Shrek franchise, it's the necessity to get back with society, no matter how withdrawn you are. With Kubo and the Two Strings, stories like that are set in environments that are pretty harsh and unforgiving to the main character, but the main character nevertheless finds these reference points for love and uses that to get through the odds no matter what. With Hunchback of Notre Dame, that's a story about searching for love, and you get that in a healthy sense with Quasimodo, and you get that in an unhealthy sense with Judge Claude Frollo. Like fire! Hellfire! That in contrast with Heaven's Light. With Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind, you've got the main character reconciling between the humans and the bugs and trying to find the best way possible to find all of them live in harmony. Alec, I'm glad you're here. Princess Mononoke and Nausicaa, my favorites. I'm glad you're here, Alec. Let's carry on with the presentation. I might need to hop off soon, but I'll try to make this as proficient as possible. I think I've got time. So, other themes I've noticed in mature animation, there's a Trigun here, which is a story that I quite like. I even purchased this manga book of Trigun lately. Again, this is where animation has its advantages. It's set in this very unique kind of world where it could be possible to go to the sets of Dune or some places of the spaghetti westerns and film these scenes for Trigun. It's possible, but at the same time, there's just so much bizarre imagery that live action probably couldn't get, such as these elaborate angelic-like transformations for Vash and another character, as well as for these plant-like creatures, as well as the unless you get a really good practitioner from Weta Workshop or something, the exact mechanisms of Wolfwood's cross weapon, which has a lot of guns in it, and whenever he's not using it, he uses it as a symbol of the cross that he carries because he's a priest. And there's this contrast of a priest who murders and Vash being a living weapon who refuses to kill, all that stuff. So as you say, Alec, Princess Mononoke is probably a great example of love in spite of the odds, because it's less of an environmental message and more of a message of finding peace on both sides. It's fascinating that Miyazaki is undebatedly a huge supporter of nature, but at the same time, Miyazaki is someone who understands human beings. Hello, Christian RPG gamers. Ashitaka has to see things through eyes unclouded by hate, and he notices that, contrary to other narratives like Avatar or like Ferngully, there's actually benefits and flaws on both sides. With the nature side, yes, you got the beauty of nature and creation and all the fresh air and the harmony that it brings, but at the same time, people on the nature side can give in more compulsively to their savage side. Meanwhile, on the human side, yes, the humans are destroying the forest, which is bad, but at the same time, they're just trying to financially look out for the outcasts of society. Ashitaka sees the beauty of both sides and tries to bring harmony between the two throughout the film, and it's brilliant. With Naoki Urasawa's Monster, our main character here, Dr. Kenzo Tenma, is a doctor who sees that all lives are equal, no matter who or where you are. I mean, yeah, sure, his ideology could be a wee bit flawed, and the show is not afraid to challenge him on that. I resonate so much with Ashitaka as a character. It's so frustrating being from both sides that hate each other. Yeah, being from a family split in half, I am in a very similar position. Oh gosh, wow, you're opening up, man. I absolutely love how he sees humanity as part of nature. Yeah, exactly. So with Kenzo Tenma, he's a doctor who thinks everyone should be spared no matter what they've done, but his ideology is challenged when he happens to spare someone who turns out to be a psychopathic killer. And that's the premise of the entire show. This doctor playing cat and mouse with this psychopathic killer, Johann Liebert. And he's been framed, and there are so many instances where Kenzo Tenma is pressured to kill somebody. And of course, there's the inevitable inclination that even when Kenzo Tenma finally finds an opportunity to catch Johann, will he actually kill him to stop him from torturing so many other people and manipulating others? So the finale plays out in such a brilliant way where it's not just Kenzo Tenma who contributes to love winning in spite of all the odds. It's also the other characters around him that contribute to that, which is why Monster has one of the greatest supporting casts ever, which is amazing. I like how timeless content has a foundation for remaining neutral. Yeah, there's that too. Another theme I've noticed is memory and legacy. You have films like The Prince of Egypt, Batman Under the Red Hood, Kubo and the Two Strings, Coco, the Toy Story series, The Incredibles, Winnie the Pooh, Lion King, Kung Fu Panda 2, The Hidden World, and so on and so forth. With those films, I mean, I found this brilliant image on Pinterest of Kubo and Miguel playing with each other. Really charming stuff. Culturally really relevant. So with I suppose it's interesting. Music can play an integral role with memory. In fact, music has been known to help people with dementia because music has such an emphasis on repetition and memory muscle stuff. And music itself is an argumentative existence of the eternal beauty because we don't need music to survive. People who are bluntly materialistic will say, well, birds don't sing, they just twitter. When you view everything from a materialistic lens, there's no need for music. It's a distraction. But at the same time, music helps with memory. Music helps with cultural identity. Music helps bring people together and stuff like that. So music plays into the themes of memory. It plays an integral role in films like Kubo and the Two Strings, where the title's literally named after the strings of the string instrument of Kubo in the Japanese culture. And how this pardon me, this string instrument has the miraculous capacity to bring these origami creations to life, or some other elements of nature, like the time he made like the leaf boat and stuff like that. And with Miguel, music is used as a means to bring back family memories, which plays an integral role for this theme where in the world of Coco, this purgatory exists, and the people living there can only live as long as they are remembered. So the moment they are forgotten, poof, they experience the final death. That all plays into, and of course, if you've seen Coco, you all know the scene that made everybody cry. in which the scene revolves around Miguel playing music to keep someone alive and keep the memory alive, as it were. I remember a quote by Ernest Hemingway in regards to neutrality. Please bring it, mention it in the live chat. I'd love to hear about it. So music can be used as a way of memory. I mean, music definitely works in musicals. Memory, all alone in the moonlight, so on and so forth. So with Cooper and the Two Strings, the string instrument is used as a symbol of sort of a family ornament, as it were, that unites the family members together, and it's definitely used as a means of cultural protection in the end. Memory and legacy is seen all throughout Kung Fu Panda in regards to who's going to be the next dragon warrior and what kind of legacy is he going to bring, how is he going to be a good teacher, and so on and so forth. It's seen with Winnie the Pooh, with the implication of Christopher Robin growing up and remembering the good times he's had with Winnie the Pooh and his friends. It's seen with The Hidden World, in which Hiccup and Astrid have to let go of their dragon friends in order to move on to a more constructive future. It's seen with The Lion King, in which legacy is implied with who is ruling Pride Rock and what kind of impact are they going to have on the land, as well as Simba's growth as a character throughout the film. This video you made looks really professional, well made. Well, I mean, it wasn't the best put together. I mean, I could have added more flair to it. Like quality and almost from a TED Talk slideshow, a great add-on. You are slowly moving up in the world. Yeah. As a writer, you should not judge, you should understand. Now, there's a thing, yeah. There's a profound thing. Everybody, give Alec a round of applause and respond to him positively, rigorously in the live chat. How else does Memory and Legacy? I suppose with Legacy, there's also stuff like Batman Under the Red Hood, where you have the impact of Batman's relationship to his Robins and one of his biggest failures in his career as Batman, and the moral consequences of his choices, and how one character, if you haven't seen it, I'm not going to give it away, one character pressures Batman into a moral dilemma, and it's got to do with the fact that he keeps sparing the Joker's life, but Batman keeps insisting, if I murder the Joker, or anyone for that matter, then I'm no different from the very criminals I'm hunting down. Right. Thank you. Jokey says the meanest nonsense you can. Oh, you. With The Incredibles, there's definitely a theme of legacy in regards to Mr. Incredible missing the golden age of superheroes before they had to go into hiding for cultural sensitivities, and the slow, gradual story of Mr. Incredible goofing up in his desperation to get back to the glory days, but ultimately this kind of redemption of getting those glory days back after the superheroes managed to save the day again. The Toy Story series is all about memory and legacy all throughout the franchise. I mean, the first story starts out simple enough, a sort of a jealousy kind of story, but the rest of the series especially taps into those themes of memory and legacy. I mean, even as far back as the first one, but the sequels more so, because Toy Story taps into nostalgia, the more simple times of childhood days and imagination and stuff like that. It's one of the reasons why Toy Story 4 surprisingly worked, because it still taps into the themes of legacy and things like that. But again, I'm very questionable as to how on earth they're going to justify Toy Story 5. Like, just have a new bunch of toy characters. There, I've solved your problem. With Spirited Away, there's a theme of memory in the fact of the search for identity. Identity plays a critical role in Spirited Away. And character revelations are made clear when identity is made clear. This is who you are. This is where you belong. Like moving on from childhood. Yeah, exactly. Another aspect of mature animation is the need for purpose. This is where the existentialist themes comes in, and this is where I would bring up stuff like Cowboy Bebop, one of my favorite shows ever made, Vinland Saga, another favorite, Blue-Eyed Samurai, Soul, Monster, Samurai Jack, Kamen Renmei, and Up. Obviously, I think Cowboy Bebop and Soul are the best examples of the existential themes, because they are the most overt in addressing what is our purpose here. No, really, what is our purpose? how are we supposed to live in this life? What do we do? So so remember when I brought up Inouye from Inside Out 2? That plays a critical role in Cowboy Bebop as a whole, especially with Spike Spiegel and Jet Black and Faye Valentine. Cowboy Bebop is very cleverly disguised as an upbeat action comedy thing like you'd see in Guardians of the Galaxy, but with more jazz flair instead of 80s rock. But underneath the surface, Cowboy Bebop is actually a bittersweet tragedy about characters who are very scared of confronting their own pasts and how they actually move on from the past. So you get all these kind of imageries like the fact that they're going through space in their spaceship symbolizes how they're stuck in this kind of limbo. The repetition of the episodic structure emphasizes the fact that the characters don't really go anywhere in their lives unless they confront their pasts, which eventually sneaks back up on them, no matter how hard they try to suppress it. With Spike Spiegel, he is a former gangster assassin who fell in love with someone named Julia, but due to these relationship breakings and mishaps from within the Red Syndicate group, Julia had to go out on the run, and Spike was kind of heartbroken, and so heartbroken to the point where he considered himself dead. And at some point later, he met up with Jet Black and decided to go on the job of being a bounty hunter. On an episodic basis, you see their everyday job of hunting down a criminal, bringing him in, dead or alive, but usually they fail, which is quite surprising. But I mean, they do succeed at times, but mostly they fail, and usually their escapades usually just end up with being haunted by the implications that the people they're chasing have a better chance of moving on from the past than they are currently. And there's various other characteristics in the lore and in their personalities that play into the themes of confronting the past and moving on. I mean, some characters have it more easier than others, like Ed, things like that. But even still, the characters have some difficulty confronting the past. But eventually they have to confront it, as well as through the confronting the past, their sense of purpose is more fulfilled. But if they don't confront the past, they'll feel further lost. So with Soul, this is a Pixar film, which is probably the most philosophical that Pixar has ever gotten so far, if you ask me. So with Soul, the premise is that Joe Gardner is a teacher, music teacher, but he's aspiring to be a jazz pianist who wants to play with this musician who looks like that one tennis player from America. Long story short, he manages to get the gig after so much time, and probably in his middle ages. But very unfortunately, he dies, and he has a near-death experience where he goes to this before-birth place, similar to the underworld from The Boy and the Heron, now that I think about it. And to make a long story short, he goes on this big, wacky adventure with another soul called Number 2, and there's mishaps about body swapping and things like that, and things that he should probably not be doing for the sake of his spirit. But to make a long story short, he finally manages to get back to his body and get back to the gig, and yes, it's spontaneous, it's brilliant, it's all that good stuff. And then it ends. And Joe's thinking, okay, that was great. What do we do next? I just thought it would fulfill me better. And this character here gives one of the best philosophical moments in any movie, where she uses this parable to bluntly state Joe Gardner's state of mind of searching for being fulfilled, but if he seeks it in this material life, it's never going to be enough. Never be enough. That musical sequence is not in this film. But basically, she says to him, there's a story about a fish. He swims up to another fish and says, hey, I'm looking for this thing they call the ocean. Do you know where it is? The other fish says, the ocean? Well, that's what you're in right now. Then the first fish says, what, this? Oh, no. This is water. What I want is the ocean. So obviously, that story points out Joe Gardner's Ecclesiastes-style pointless chasing of the wind. No matter what you do in the material life is not enough to fulfill you. Your purpose has to be transcendent. And so Joe realizes that he never was that grateful about his life, which is a similar theme in Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, now that I think about it. Deep Christian themes here. Yeah, exactly. I mean, there's a lot of other religions mentioned in Soul, but it plays around with the sort of before birthplace just to try to make the message clear to as broad an audience as possible. As well as this implication of this great beyond where the souls don't go back after they die. Joe decides to go back to his piano at home and enters this spiritual state which this film calls the zone. It's this sort of spiritual state where you're so into living the present moment that you enter this transcendent plane of existence. It happened when people are like at their A game, as it were. And with Joe, he finds it when he's playing the piano, and it's sort of the sort of northern-like kind of imagery that happens. As he's doing that, suddenly memories come back from his childhood and just all the simple pleasures in life, and realizing the profound beauty that life is actually more enjoyable when you realize how simple it ought to be. And from there, he's more present in the fact that he's more appreciative of the things around him, like the wonders of nature, the taste of food, just being there with his family. All these things he had taken for granted because he was so fixated on next thing. And people who suffer with OCD, good grief, they suffer from this condition. Being present is good for your mental health. And counting your blessings is good for your spiritual health. You have to tap into the timeless plane of, timeless beauty in order to find out that you were made to be more than a material thing, and that's where you find your sense of meaning and purpose from. Other existential themes appear. I think these are the strongest examples I could think of. There's Up, which is another film made by Pete Docter, in which Carl Fredricksen takes his house to Paradise Falls. He goes on this journey, but by the time he gets there, especially given that he made a big compromise, he thinks, was this really worth it? But then he realizes, thanks to his late wife, that the adventure was in the everyday stuff. So it's not the first time Pete's delved into these kind of themes. With Samurai Jack, the existentialism is felt through the sheer isolation that the main character feels. And you really feel that through the combination of the slow pacing of the show, as well as this tragic fact that no matter how hard he tries, he keeps missing opportunities to get back in time, and it weighs on him. And the creators actually take advantage of that in the reboot season 5 of the show. And Jack realizes, what's the point in keeping on fighting if things just keep repeating and repeating and repeating? But eventually Jack still finds reason to fight nonetheless. And Christian RPG Gamer says, there's a guy out there on YouTube called Christ and Comics. You should consider checking out some of the stuff he makes, content similar to yours. You both teach me similar stuff. Thank you. You're welcome. I'm so glad me and him can contribute to your deeper understanding of culture. That's why channels like this exist. Increase your cultural understanding, and more hopefully, bring people closer to the Lord. So with Monster, the existential themes are interwoven with this good versus evil narrative, especially with the need for purpose, because the main antagonist of Monster, and I suppose with Batman too, but with Joker and Johann Liebert, their stance in life is everyone dies, so what's the point in living? And from there, that is their mental way of justifying all the torture and manipulation that they do. But our main characters, Batman and in Monster's case, Tenma, try to argue back that life is worth living because people do have innate value to them. And life is worth living because we're much more than machines destined to die. The need for purpose can also be seen with Vinland Saga and Blue-Eyed Samurai, which criticizes revenge And Blue-Eyed Samurai is such a refreshing take on the strong female character trope because it actually takes our protagonist into accountability and telling her off in a meta-narrative kind of way to suggest there's more to life than revenge. Stop it, or else you're going to suffer the consequences in your personal relationships. Haibane Renmei, there's the focus is on redemption, and that's basically the purpose. There's also the need for balance with nature. You'll find this in Fantasia 2000's Firebird Suite, Princess Mononoke, The Red Turtle, and How to Train Your Dragon. I think, obviously, it's most strong in Princess Mononoke, one of my favorite films ever made. I've used this picture here because I think I mentioned these characters earlier. Well, more specifically, I mentioned the nature side and the human side earlier, but I suppose I should delve more in depth with the characters of Princess Mononoke. So, on your right, you see Princess San, the titular Princess Mononoke, which means Princess of Vengeful Spirits. The story with her is that her human parents ditched her, and she was quite literally raised by wolves, much like Mowgli from the Jungle Book, except these wolves are ginormous because this is the sort of Japanese setting where it's a sort of Shinto setting where there's these nature gods, and there's this really big god who's like this god of the forest who takes care of everything. San, well, basically from her upbringing, knows the innate necessity of nature and the harmony that it brings. So when the humans threaten to cut it all down, especially given the fact that whenever you, especially with the boars, if you irritate, whenever the boars suffer wounds to the point of complete irritation, they're more likely to become demons. And it was one of those demons that infected Ashitaka with a curse, and that's why he's going on his adventure to reconcile the two sides together. So, obviously, Sam can certainly make the point, well, she started it! I mean, that would be true in many ways, but at the same time, with Lady Eboshi here on the left, there was societal pressures from the Emperor and other people, and the fact that they cast out all these lepers and all these prostitutes and all these kinds of people. Yeah, this PG-rated film overtly mentions prostitutes and lepers, and this PG-rated film has a decaying corpse in the first few minutes of the movie. Yeah, that's the kind of maturity we're going for, everybody. It should have been rated 12, good grief. So, with Lady Eboshi, she represents the human side with the technology. So, she takes in all these outcasts, which really humanizes her. She has a social understanding with people, especially given the nature of women, and Miyazaki understands this innate nurturing strength that women have. She's the leader of the humans, and she's leading the people to burn down the forest so that they can gain access to iron, which will make their community, their independent community, further thrive. But of course, in order to get the iron, they have to burn down the forest, and so there's a conflict between the two sides on who gets the domain of the forest. Will Lady Eboshi and her gunpowder military and her wit be able to outwit and kill all the gods of the forest? Or will the gods of the forest, in their savage anger, be able to outdo all these pesky humans, as it were? Both sides have their flaws, and this is a very nuanced take, especially for someone who would normally heavily side on the nature side. Miyazaki is such a supporter of nature that he overtly said, I'm looking forward to the day where society crumbles and nature takes back over again. Like, that's how pro-nature he is. But even with that said, he's also someone who understands human beings, and human beings, throughout Miyazaki's works, there's this theme of needing to find harmony between humanity and nature, and like, technology and nature can coexist. They really can. And Ashitaka has to reconcile the both sides. Even if the two sides never fully reconciled, there's at least a mutual understanding by the end of the film about the necessity for this harmony that Ashitaka is endorsing. With that How to Train Your Dragon, you see a similar theme with the Vikings fighting the dragons, and how Hiccup befriends one particular dragon with the red turtle. It's about this man's struggle against nature and eventual acceptance of it. With the Firebird Suite, it's this sort of nature spirit thing that is trying to turn winter into spring and is in conflict with the lava bird, but eventually finds the motivation by the deer to make spring again. A very basic example, but very beautiful example too. Another theme in mature animation I've noticed are tragedies. Not every work of art is inherently got a happy ending. I mean, we all prefer happy endings, but a brutal fact that all of us have to accept is that life is full of suffering, and we must suffer. We have to take up our cross. If we're not willing to take up our cross, we're in denial. I mean, life is full of suffering. There's people I know who've got illnesses. There's conditions that people get into. There's certain addictions people get into, and people are trying to recover from the addictions and having to improve your body and having to take the time to clean up and get through these illnesses and helping each other out. Everybody suffers. That is inevitable. If you deny that, you're in denial. But mature animation has the potential to actually address the innate tragedies of life. Of course, the most prominent example I'm giving is Attack on Titan, and I love this minimal picture of one of the scouts going up against this massive titan. I'm so happy that this has the potential to be one of the best front covers for the Attack on Titan series. This sort of David versus Goliath kind of story. Attack on Titan delves into the themes of the cycle of violence and how the attempt to stop it is rarely ever cut and clean easy. In fact, many people in their flawed, biased ways often make things worse because they're motivated by anger, and they're also still very bitter about this psychological concept called the shadow of history. And that in itself would explain a lot about the current state of today's culture, where people are very fixated on the sins of the transatlantic slave trade. And that's understandable. The transatlantic slave trade was a horrible thing that should never happen again. But what a lot of people overlook is the fact that that kind of slavery's been happening all throughout history, throughout various cultures, throughout various time periods. But people seem to be silent about that because they want to spread this very black and white narrative, which really doesn't work. I mean, these kind of stories usually say that life's not black and white. Black and white thinking is not going to help anybody. The truth is, everyone's got flaws. I've got flaws. You've got flaws. We all got flaws. So if we don't acknowledge our flaws, then we're prone to making the same mistakes again and again. That's what happens if you don't learn from history. So don't try to erase history. Other tragedies. Grave of the Fireflies, one of the few films that legitimately made me really, really cry. It's a story where, made from Japan itself, talking about the downfall of this excessive pride in oneself, in one's country, even that when the circumstances around you are not in your favor. I mean, pride can be a healthy thing if applied to being motivated to do something good, but of course, in these kind of stories, pride comes before the fall, in the fact that people think, I could do things myself, I could do things my own way. But the main character of the story, oh boy, he suffers because of that kind of pride. Isn't black and white morality a good thing, though? I mean, obviously, the thing about black and white morality is that, yes, we do need that absolute objective standard for morality, absolutely. we need that absolute standard to keep people accountable in the first place. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to discern what's good and what's bad in the first place. But at the same time, there's a lot of problems that happen in life, and people tend to view things through a black and white lens in which it's either one extreme or the other, when they don't really seem to find some kind of better way. Like, for example, I've noticed a lot of people trying to obey certain sets of rules can be really, really, really hard on themselves whenever they fail to do something, rather than nurture themselves to thinking, look, it's okay. You're on a journey. We can mature and grow through this. Yes, you did a bad thing, but you don't need to beat yourself up for it. Don't condemn yourself. Condemning is actually the way of the scribes and the Pharisees, and unless you transcend the scribes and the Pharisees, you're not really going to get anywhere. You need to take it easy on yourself, and you need to approach others with the same way, because if all you're doing is condemning yourself, then it's very similar to that parable from that Jesus Christ talked about, in which he said that there was a king who addressed someone who got into trouble for not paying up his debt, and this person who couldn't pay up his debt said, please, give me more time, and then the king in his grace said, okay, I'll let you go just by my sheer grace. Oh, thank you so much. But then that person who the king let go free went up to some other person and said, hey, give me all your money, come on, give it to me now. But then the king said, hey, come back, what are you doing? I showed grace to you, why aren't you doing that with other people? That's what I mean. That's exactly what I mean. It's very easy to condemn. It's easy to condemn ourselves, it's easy to condemn others. But grace and relationship takes work. It takes a lot of work. So that's what I mean. That's what I mean by that. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with absolute morality. In fact, absolute morality is what we should be striving for. That's how we can tell good from evil in the first place. But at the same time, we need to have mercy on ourselves and on others if we want to see some real growth. So, going back to tragedies, let's see, I suppose there's a tragedy like Batman Under the Red Hood, with Batman failing to save somebody and the consequences that come with that, but still finding the best way out of that nonetheless. You've got Kubo and the Two Strings, where the main character, oh boy, that main character loses so many family members. Good grief. Yeah, thank you very much. Good grief, Kubo loses a lot of family members and goes through so much hardship and tragedy. But at the same time, even despite the loss that Kubo suffers throughout the film, he still manages to find the light of that comes from the memories of family, from his community, and the love that brings. With Blue Eyed Samurai, it's the tragedy that comes with being completely obsessed about revenge. And speaking of vengeance story, you also got Berserk, which never ever show to little children, because Berserk is really extreme. And Berserk, especially if you're only just familiar with the Golden Age arc, it's innately tragic, and definitely in a Nietzschean sense. The characters suffer. They really suffer throughout Berserk. But even in that kind of tragedy, there's still a beauty to be found through endurance, which I'll get into later. Another aspect of animation for mature audiences is the appreciation of the arts themselves. So you have films like Ratatouille, Fantasia and Fantasia 2000, and Kubo and the Two Strings. I've been eating a dinner a bit lately. That's why I keep burping. It's just as well we brought this image up. Praise the Lord. So, some films actually delves deep into the appreciation of making art stuff. In fact, there was this one episode of The Kirby Show which is literally all about how an animation is made, and it's all animated. It's completely meta. There's even entire animes dedicated to that. With the appreciation of the arts, it delves into the love of the craft and the expression that comes from stuff like Fantasia and Fantasia 2000 especially, and how that love of the craft could really bring out the best in people. With Ratatouille, that topic is with cooking. With Fantasia 2000, it's with music and visual storytelling with animation. With Kubo and the Two Strings, it's music. And with the art from the paper origami. And basically the main message of Kubo and the Two Strings, well, one of the main topics of Kubo and the Two Strings is the appreciation of the art of storytelling itself as a main contributor to having a stronger union with families. Especially with Ratatouille, the speech by Anton Ego really brings together the whole message about the film. When Anton Ego says, "Not everyone can cook." Not everyone. I finally realized what Gusto realized by what he said by how anyone can cook. Not everyone can be a great artist, but a great artist can come from anywhere. So anyone has the potential to do it, and anyone has the potential to appreciate all these different things. I mean, not everybody. Everyone's got a given role. Everyone's got part of the body, as it were. But definitely appreciating the arts is a necessary thing in life. So that's another thing that mature animation can definitely delve into. I've noticed there's also the theme of endurance throughout these mature animations. I've picked more masculine examples here. Sorry, ladies. But ladies, if you have... ladies have their own way of enduring as well. Feel free to mention any examples of the feminine type to bring up here. But these stories appeal to male and female anyway. With stories like The Prince of Egypt, Batman the Animated Series, Samurai Jack, Vinland Saga, Spirit Stallion of the Cimarron? However you pronounce it. Themes of endurance are fairly frequent throughout these kind of stories. With these kind of stories, there's usually a definitive good versus evil, and how no matter how overwhelming evil is, and certainly in Batman's case, no matter how much evil keeps turning up its face, and no matter how much evil pushes you to the test, Batman has been tested psychologically, physically, emotionally, spiritually, sexually, and all these different aspects, and yet he still endures. He's still willing to protect Gotham, no matter how much of a pigsty the place is. And he's still willing to not kill Joker, no matter how atrocious the man is. And, of course, there's... even the Batman the Animated Series delves into the implication that Batman could possibly be insane when they take him to court, because insane means doing the exact same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. But they ultimately conclude that Batman wouldn't have existed without these criminals in the first place, so the joke's on them. With Samurai Jack, there's a theme of endurance about how Jack has patience about the slowness of things, and there's this one episode particularly which I really should have thought. I think this particular episode I'm going to mention about Samurai Jack should have been the finale of season 4, but instead it's episode, I think it's in one of the first episodes of season 2, but it's such a powerful episode. So it starts off with, it's called Jack and the Three Monks. So it starts off with Jack failing to reach another time portal, and this time he gets really frustrated, just expressing just how hopeless the whole thing is. He gets frustrated when his straw hat gets blown off by the wind, only for these three monks to catch it, and three monks express, we're going to climb that mountain. And then Jack, just out of interest, decides, you know what? Bring it on. Let's climb this mountain. well, I think it was actually the three monks said that there's an ancient power up the mountain, and there's this implication that Jack thinks it could be another attempt of a time portal. But basically, the three monks to go up there. Jack's fighting off these threats, but the three monks seem to be having it really easy, especially eating this stuff from these stones with like some kind of goo in there. Maybe they're eggs or something. But eventually Jack loses track of the monks entirely, and he's falling down this stone wall, but then he has to fight off this creature, and then he gets back up again, and then it's really snowy, and he really should have wrapped up because it's snowy, and then he confronts this sort of Yeti kind of creature, and he's having a really hard time fighting this creature before he just screams to get the icicles to shake, and then he escapes, and then he's climbing up this sheer rock face cliff, and he's suggesting it's all hopeless, but then he has a vision of the three monks saying, are you just going to give up? Have you forgotten? And then Jack's determined to get back up and say, no, I haven't forgotten. So no, I haven't forgotten. So he keeps climbing, and then he reaches the top of the spectacular view. There wasn't a time portal there, but Jack understands that this was just meant to make him stronger, and then Jack calls out, Aku, I will get back to the past and I will destroy it. It's such a powerful visual example of endurance that I can think of. I suppose there's also the endurance of the animation discipline itself, like for the parting of the Red Sea sequence. It says here, it required 10 digital artists, 16 traditional animators, 2 programmers, and more than 318,000 hours of rendering time. Especially considering they made this in the 1990s when CGI was comparatively more primitive compared to now. That is immense that this kind of film still holds up, just due to the sheer amount of effort that these artists dedicated to the project. I mean, they took 4.5 years or something like that, 3 to 4.5 years or something, just to make this film possible. And it's the best film DreamWorks has ever made, if you ask me. Just, I mean, speaking of endurance, I mean, you got the Prince of Egypt story as well, with the endurance that Moses has to go through in persuading the Pharaoh to let his people go. And no matter how stubborn the Pharaoh is, Moses will just keep with the power of God, send plague after plague after plague until that stubborn Pharaoh, finally changes his mind. They have other trials and tribulations that they have to keep going through. I keep hearing about the anime of Vinland Saga. I might have to check it out. My only turn off is that I don't think it's voiced in English. It is, but funnily enough, there's 2 ways of viewing it in English for some reason. There's one dub. I think it's exclusive to Amazon. I think. I can't remember the dub, but there's another one that's made exclusive for Netflix only. And there's a debate among people as to which English dub is better. The one that was made by this group of people, or I think it was the Amazon people, or the Netflix dub. I've noticed that the Amazon dub definitely gets the certain pronunciations of names names right. Like, for example, the character Ashenlad, even though it looks like it ought to be said as Askeladd, the right pronunciation for the culture is Ashenlad. So they get some certain pronunciations right. But at the same time, in my opinion, I actually think the vocal performances of the Netflix version is better, because specific characters sound more age appropriate to their characters, and it's less cheesy, even if some of the lines may not be I've heard that said that even though the pronunciation might be a wee bit off, but I think the Netflix version is the superior English dub, I think. But yes, there are ways of viewing it in English, but whichever dub you choose, it's a brilliant story, and even just watching it in just Japanese is a brilliant in itself. So, another theme I've noticed throughout mature animations is the subject of conquering fear. I've noticed this most prominently. I mean, I'm sure people in the comments can correct me on some other examples, but I see it most prominently in films like the movies made by Don Bluth, like The Secret of Nim, shown here, An American Tale, The Land Before Time. Well, basically three of the best of Don Bluth's movies before he went into that dark age where he was making a lot of corporate schlock with like Troll in Central Park and Rock-a-Doodle-Doo. But All Dogs Go to Heaven had a fairly decent enough reception, enough for it to be considered nostalgic for a lot of people, and a lot of people really liked Anastasia. So there is that to consider, but I think on a critical basis, people consider The Secret of Nim, The Land Before Time, and American Tale to be the pinnacle of Don Bluth's career, because those stories delve into topics about confronting really scary stuff. Don Bluth is the kind of director who's not afraid of showing some particularly dark, scary moments that Disney wouldn't even attempt to do that. I mean, Disney's done this sort of thing too, but not to the extreme that Don Bluth did it. Like, Don Bluth will have these really scary monsters, like Sharptooth the T-Rex, or like specific cats from An American Tale in Russia, and certain other creatures like a cat from like the Secret of Nim and the stuff like that. But eventually, they do get resolved with a happy ending in the end. Like, Nostalgia Critic, who was a big fan of Don Bluth, said that Don Bluth considered that you could show the children anything scary as long as it had a happy ending. Because the happy ending rewards the children with the fact that no matter what you go through, everything's going to be alright in the end. In the Don Bluth movies, I think the most prominent example shown here is The Secret of Nim. The premise is that there's a mouse family, and there's a single mother named Mrs. Brisby. It's based on a book called... Oh, balls to the walls. No. I'm going to have to wrap this up very quickly. Hold on a minute. I've been doing this for too long. Right. Hold on a minute. I'll be right. Right, I'm gonna have to wrap this up, but basically, with Puss in Boots: The Last Wish, there's also this prominent aspect of Puss conquering his fear of death and the themes of mortality that come with that. And there's other YouTubers who would have delved into that kind of thing, but it really delved into the themes of anxiety. But eventually, you have to accept that you're gonna die anyway. And through that, you really begin to live. And in The Secret of Nim, Miss Brisby overcomes these fearful obstacles in the name of love. Love helps you conquer fear, basically. So why do people appreciate mature animation? Because they're not afraid to take their time for deeper emotion. They don't talk down to anyone. They have this imaginative capacity for storytelling that is limitless. So how does animation enhance narratives? That use it in heightened emotional expression, symbolism, action as narrative, subtlety and energy in action narrative in these shows here, aesthetic appeal. And what's the best way to make engaging mature animation? Use whatever techniques necessary to complement the themes and the tone. Don't talk down to anyone. Use immersive world building even through dialogue in subtle ways. Address existential topics with constructive suggestions. Show, don't tell, and don't cram the message down people's throats. And you can really bring in some brilliantly enriching conversations into these kinds of stories. So there's my sources, and thank you for watching. If anyone has any further questions, please feel free to mention them in the comments, and I'll address them. But I don't have much time right now. I've got to get going. But thank you all so much for watching. Aspire for great animation.